Would be my pleasure, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let me just say good afternoon, good evening to the members of the committee, and to thank you for the opportunity to make this oral presentation to you this evening. The explanation is not within my 10 minutes, sir, because I have not got it in my speech.
That is not within your 10 minutes. Be setting the record straight in terms of your nomenclature. So this is not engaging your 10 minutes.
My 10 minutes, okay, fine. In 2018, I was appointed the International Governor of the Academy of Universal Global Peace USA, a CUN affiliate, to Barbados. And the designation I carry in that context is His Excellency. And it's within that context that I operate. That's 30 seconds, right?
Okay. Okay, sir, because you and I go far back. Our families, your aunt was my godmother. So I was wondering this, His Excellency, sir, which I know nothing of. So you have 10 minutes, sir, maximum, to make whatever case you want to make, for, against, neutral, for either of these two bills, and then afterwards, honorable members of this committee will be given the opportunity to engage you on anything you've said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me begin by saying I'm seated here not as a lawyer or a cybercrime expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I do have concerns that I will attempt to address in a broad way this evening, but a little different, I believe, from what you would have expected, because I think there's some that would anticipate I would present certain specifics. But I want, as one of my colleagues say to me, I want to a large degree stay in my lane. And as such, I want to take the opportunity to commend the government, first of all, for seeking to protect the interests and well-being of the citizens of Barbados through the Cybercrime Bill. Given the recent spate of online incursions into both the private sector and the public sector, it is noteworthy that efforts are being made to protect the country from invasive forms of cybercrime. I am here today, however, as an ambassador for what is considered by many to be the highest form of government known to mankind, and that has gifted this administration with the opportunity to govern the affairs of the people of this country. As such, I fulfill a role that I view beyond that of either Parliament or Senate, and for that matter, beyond this joint committee. A previous presenter was afforded as much as over 2.5 hours, but as you've just heard, the chairman, he's allocated 10 minutes to me. There are a number of messages since this cybercrime bill has made public in engagement I've received regarding concerns and fears of myriads of people pertaining to this bill. It is seen by some as a threat to their fundamental freedoms and liberties, and the fear of simply freedom of speech and expression being targeted for criminalization. It is seen by some as an invasion of their liberties and freedoms and privacy. And yet others, such as spiritual ministers, see some sections of this bill as a threat to their free declaration of the gospel in a country where religious freedom is hailed. Our national anthem encapsulates the point that the Lord has been the people's guide for past 300 years. And it goes on to tell us that he's on the people's side. And as easily as he has granted this administration the opportunity to care for the affairs of the people of Barbados, he can and he will, if forced to, revoke that privilege. And he doesn't need an election to do so. He will hold every one of you in this committee accountable for the decisions that you make that are capable of affecting the lives of people, whether negatively or positively. You should take this committee meeting as a reprieve from him to get this bill right. The voice of the people, we are often told, is the voice of God, and people are speaking. By the same token, I wish to remind everyone that freedom is not the right to do what you want, but it is the power to do what you ought. This administration has been elected and by extension employed by the people of Barbados to look after the interests of the people locally, regionally, and internationally. It is therefore necessary for the public to be engaged before decisions that can have a lifetime ramifications on the people be made by any administration. Regrettably, this appears to not have been done in this instance, and so we are here today. Permit me to quote from a speech made by the then leader of the opposition, now Prime Minister, in the lead up to the 2018 general election, and I quote, "Today is about sending a message that the people of Barbados will not allow anybody, neither Labour Party, Barbados Labour Party, Democratic Labour Party, private sector, to intimidate it, not ever again. You have been raised to think for yourself, and you have the right to speak out. And you have the right to speak out without somebody trying to unfair you in this country. So today is equally about reclaiming for Barbadians the right to express themselves in an environment where fear is removed. We do not believe that the charging of a reverend for saying this is the worst government, or threatening businessmen with contracts, or threatening people with jobs, this cannot continue in Barbados of the 21st century. And if ever the time comes that you give us the confidence to lead you, we too must ensure that we never rule a government to unfair or cause fear in this country. This is the solemn promise of the Barbados Labour Party." End of quote. A solemn promise can almost be equated to a spiritual statement. It's as serious a statement as you can possibly make, such as when you stood taking your vows at the altar when you got married. A solemn promise was made. And this administration was elected based on that solemn promise. And there is an applicable biblical verse that cautions, even warns us, not to make vows that we do not intend to keep, for God considers such persons to be fools. I'm sure that no one seated in this honorable chamber wishes to have the highest power we know of consider us to be fools. I could inundate you with a myriad of international documents speaking to the need to proceed with discretion and care as it relates to the implementation of the cybercrime legislation as guided, for example, by the Budapest Convention, or extracts from the United Nations Charter on Human Rights that speak to the protection of the right to freedom of expression, which, for the sake of some present, includes freedom of speech. Or references to the matters of proportionality as expressed under the European Convention of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and other applicable international human rights instruments. There are more questions than there are answers. Where are the safeguards and conditions also included in the Cybercrime Convention in the Cybercrime Bill before us now in Barbados? Why are sections of the bill seeking to criminalize the Barbadian public rather than ensure the safeguards and conditions identified by the Cybercrime Convention? There's much more that I can say regarding this bill, but the allotted time, sir, does not permit me to do so. I am, however, confident, especially having listened to my previous, the speaker that preceded me, I'm confident that other presenters will address those areas of concern specifically. But before I conclude, let me be clear. Citizens are not against this bill in its totality, but only against certain sections such as found between clauses 19 through 23, which either need to be dramatically amended or removed in totality. I dare say that there may be those who might have felt that I should have engaged more of the specific areas of the bill. But my duty as given to me today is to caution you as you make your decisions and the conclusion of these contributions, written or oral. The people are watching you, and they are not afraid. But a higher authority is also watching you, and he will hold you accountable for any action taken to the detriment of the people you represent. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I pray God's blessings and direction as you deliberate on the contributions that have been made. Whatever you do, know that the time for any theatrics in Barbados is over. This is the Barbados of the 21st century. Thank you.
I thank you, Reverend Nicholls, and for your imparting God's guidance on the deliberations of this committee and indeed on the deliberations of the government as a whole. I invite members to engage in discussion with Reverend Nicholls if so minded.
I'll just ask one question. In your presentation, Reverend, you asked the question, I know you say you will not go into any specifics, but you did ask the question, why are sections of the bill seeking to criminalize sections of the Barbadian public? I think that's a statement or a question that requires greater explanation. I mean, yes, you identify sections 19 to 23, but you really need to speak to as to why you believe that this bill, I don't necessarily support that view, this bill is seeking to criminalize sections of the Barbadian public, and really would want to speak to that section of the Barbadian public that you're referring to, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Well, of course, in the 10 minutes I was allocated, there's a lot more I said as I could say, because I actually brought 2 submissions with me this afternoon. I smiled a little earlier when I heard that a Pentecostal minister was being given 10 minutes to speak. That in itself is a miraculous accomplishment and achievement. Nevertheless, one of the areas deals with the aspect of what could be considered as cyberbullying. And the definition of the word bullying suggests, for example, that the one who is perpetrating the bullying is obviously more powerful. They have a greater, whether it be physical or otherwise, capability. The bill threatens $70,000 fines and up to 7-year incarcerations for cyberbullying, which includes using a computer system to publish, broadcast, or transmit data that is offensive, pornographic, indecent, vulgar, profane, obscene, or, which of course, I think we all agree. I don't think we would disagree with those particular sentiments. Or to cause annoyance, we are looking in section 20. My apologies, section 20. Or to cause annoyance, inconvenience, danger, obstruction, embarrassment, insult, injury, humiliation, intimidation, hatred, anxiety, or causing substantial emotional distress. Now, I could be standing in my pulpit a Sunday morning preaching a message that does not endorse homosexuality or lesbianism, which the scripture says such were some of us, suggesting change is very possible. And that could cause some humiliation to some. It may cause some intimidation to others. It may cause some annoyance. And what, in its broad expression, the bill is suggesting, and this is why I'm thankful that Mr. Green referenced the perception. The bill is suggesting that if I did that, I could find my actions criminalized. And as far as I'm aware, and I stand to be corrected because I expressed that I am not a lawyer, once that goes on my record, it's on my record. Would I be correct? For those of you who are more knowledgeable. So the expansion of the scope on the meaning of cyberbullying beyond specific definitional terms can lead to challenges in interpretation. A review of what acts are considered to be cyberbullying in various jurisdictions highlights that the Barbados Cybercrime Bill 2024 unnecessarily broadens the scope of acts of cyberbullying. The bill uses language that combines words open to being deemed as vague or overly broad or arbitrary and or subjective and uncertain, and expands the potential reach of the law beyond what is necessary or clear. I must confess that yesterday I had a debate with two of my children on some of these matters. And I found it very interesting, members of the committee, that they were somewhat fully supportive of taking action in this area to some degree, especially when one considers that there are some aspects that, if they are enacted by an individual, can have long-term impacts on a person's ability to be employed, their ability to travel for that matter, their relational components, and other areas. And I thought it rather interesting because I raised the point with them where they felt that it was not the responsibility of the law to police their children, but the parents. And that if an act, of course, I believe there is a limitation in terms of legal action that can be taken against a minor. And in the absence of that, the action I would expect to be taken against the adult. And they felt that that, to some degree, in some instances, was in place because some adults just do not monitor what their children are doing. And so, as you know, I believe it's right that around 33% of the activity on the internet today through social media is done by young people. And a lot of that aspect of cyberbullying occurs on the internet. And in one instance, I remember in the United States actually led to the death of a child. And that is just one specific area. There's some others that we can touch on.
Reverend Nicholls, I have absolutely no intention of getting into any debate with you on religion. You would say I'm not qualified to do so, just like how you're freely admitted you're not qualified in law. But under Section 21 of our Constitution, of course, not Section 21, freedom of conscience 1. Well, you have freedom of assembly under Section 21 and association, freedom of conscience, Section 19, which speaks towards freedom of thought and of religion, etc. And of course, it's your freedom of religious expression to condemn homosexuality in every form, and you ground biblical context in that. Others think otherwise. And I don't know that this bill, as presently drafted, is going to curtail you from what you have been doing, you and some of your fellow colleague Pentecostal UUC associates. But surely, I have to ask you, if you were to go, say on the pulpit next week, Sunday, I hate homosexuals. I feel that all of them should be killed. Kill all homosexuals. Do you think that you have the right to say so? Because you have a constitutional right to freedom of conscience and freedom of association and assembly. Because you don't agree with homosexuality, that you can, within the context of cybercrime bill, right now, post on a computer that all homosexuals, practicing and otherwise, closet, open, whatever, should be killed. They have no right to be living in this country. They are an abomination in the eyes of the Lord. You feel you have the right to say so?
Mr. Chairman, I believe the Budapest Convention addresses matters of xenophobia. And that is from that perspective. But since you're asking me the personal question, that would be a betrayal of what I believe. When one considers, as I mentioned a moment ago, there's actually a biblical verse that references the fact that such were some of us. But we have been washed, we have been justified, we have been sanctified. So for me to stand in my pulpit and promote hatred of any entity, whether it be persons of gender, race, color, or otherwise, is inconsistent with my faith. I deal with a Lord who came into this world because he loved. However, it can often be seen that when one is objectional to a matter, that they automatically hate. And that is not necessarily the case. We can disagree, but our disagreement does not necessarily mean I don't like you or I hate you. I disagree with your view on freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but my relationship with you will not change. And so I have to be committed primarily because as I sat here, I said to you and to the committee, I sit here as an ambassador for the highest government that we know of. And I am committed to that government. And incidentally, I am not speaking on the behalf of the Pentecostals or the Pentecostal Assembly or any other religious denomination in Barbados. So I would be betraying my faith if I was to make a comment like that. Since this pandemic has begun, that we have just passed through, the matter of trust of governments globally has been an issue for every single citizen. When we began this pandemic, we were told that much of what highly expert, highly reputable professional individuals expressed concerning the pandemic was misinformation and false information. That was equally applied to the treatments that were mandated by governments. Where today, just today, AstraZeneca has admitted finally that their treatment has serious side effects. We were saying that from the beginning. I remember watching an interview with an administrative individual of a particular country, which I will not reference, in which they told the interviewer, we need to control the information that is going out. When the persons who were promoting misinformation and false information were governments and the mainstream media. And I make no apologies when I say that there are certain international agencies, again, which I will respect, that are complicit in that action. The European Union has established a committee specifically to investigate the pandemic and the after effects of the treatments that has proven that every single thing that was said prior to, by the very man that mandated and brought out the treatment itself, was correct. And so as a result of all of that, when you put all of that together for the citizens of a country, governments, period, have lost the trust of their citizens. That is not in doubt. If you go to Spain, if you go to Italy, if you go to the United Kingdom, if you go to the United States, if you go to Australia, if you go to New Zealand, if you come to Barbados, you find that trust is at a very low level. Now, from a ministerial standpoint, trust is an extremely difficult thing to repair once violated. And it takes time. And it takes admission of failure in order to begin that process. The previous contributor mentioned the matter of communication. Many years ago, I was sitting in a marriage seminar in which the minister spoke of the fact that communication was the roof of the marriage. And in truth and in fact, in any relationship, communication is key. And when communication is found not to be true, you have a major crisis on your hand at every relational level. And that is the problem we have had over the last 3 to 4 years. It is known beyond all shadow of a doubt. The Prime Minister of Canada is currently facing serious legal ramifications as a result of his autocratic mandates in Canada. It is there for the whole world to see. And so as a result of that, it has had that, I don't know if you can call it trickle-down effect, where people simply now don't trust. If you ask me how a government can repair that, it has to start to be transparent.
No, I'm not asking.
You're not asking me that?
No.
So you want me to hold on that one? I'll make that a part of my campaign.